Good morning, everybody. It's another episode of It's Tea Time with Tony Westwood, my very good friend, and myself, Neville Gaunt. And this is the Open wrap-up. What an Open we had. The Claret Jug going to 24-year-old, first time he's ever played on a course in the UK, and boy, did he do us all proud. So, Tony, let's go through our little routine, our pre, during, and post routine of what happened at last weekend's amazing show. I mean, I was just spellbound by it all. I don't know about you. What were your thoughts?
Well, the interesting thing for me, I think, Neville, was how good these players are actually getting. You know, years ago, I mean, I started playing golf really mid to late 70s. And as we know, the big players at the time were the likes of Nicklaus, Trevino, Watson, Weierskopf. You know, all those players were pitching up at tournaments, and there was maybe 10 or 12 guys could win an event. You know, Nicklaus is well documented in walking around a car park going, that guy's talking about how strong the wind's blowing, and he's talking about how fast the greens are. And he's just
cross.
Off. I've got him beat. You look at a tournament now, and there's so many new names up at the top of the leaderboard. You know, just the fact that you occupy maybe one of the 10 or 15 or 20 slots as being the best player in the world counts for not a great deal these days, because the guys behind them, these young guys coming through, are so good. I mean, I watched players playing in the Scottish Open the week before and the week before that in Ireland, and these guys are seriously good golfers. And all they need is they're waiting for that break. They're waiting to hold that putt, to hold that chip. And we're going to see some really, really new names hitting the heights very, very soon. None more so, as you quite rightly said, from, you know, Colin Morikawa. He's debuted in 2 majors and he's won 2 majors. That's kind of
too
fairly. If we're measuring things on KPIs, he's doing pretty well at the
pretty
moment.
well. Yeah, I'd retire while he's ahead, you know. But the best is yet to come, though. I mean, that's the interesting thing.
I mean, the guy's 24 years old. He's amazing. You know, and it was just interesting, you know, reading the papers beforehand, you know, the bits around social media, seeing how difficult they'd made the golf course. You know, it's been quite a while since I've seen rough kind of that long at an Open Championship golf course. Obviously, here in the UK, we've had an amazing year for that, because we've had spells of warm, wet weather. So the rough has got really, really lush. I think you'd have to go back to probably all the players dubbed as Carnasty when the Open made a visit up to the Dundee area many years ago, and the wind and the rain blew. And I think links golf is at its best when the wind blows, and when when the rain comes down, but certainly when the wind blows.
When the wind blows, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't get that. Certainly, the weekend was very, very benign. But the wind did blow a bit on Thursday, Friday, and it just sorts out the men from the boys. You really see the players who can cope. And it's not, we know well, it's not just coping with swinging the club and hitting the ball well. It's coping with what happens when you swing that club and when you either hit it well or when you don't hit it well. And it's how you process that information after you've hit that shot, dealing with ups and downs. You can hit a great shot on a links course and be straight down the middle of the fairway. And listening to Ken Brown on the BBC commentary, a lot of these fairways are kind of raised in the middle. So you could hit it straight down the middle and bounce into the rough. But you could hit it down the side and you'll stay on the fairway. So being precise is exactly what was needed. So, you know, are you going to draw it into a slope or fade it into a slope? And how is that slope going to influence what's happening to the golf ball? And if you can manage those things, more importantly, I think it's it's so important to manage yourself well in the days up to the event in preparation. So the guys would have turned up maybe on Saturday or Sunday. Practice rounds would have started Monday and Tuesday. How they're preparing for what's happening is going to determine who's going to be successful come Sunday night and picking up that famous claret jug in the 149th Open. And I think that's key, really. All of that preparation, it doesn't start on the Thursday morning. It started days and potentially weeks before that in terms of how you're preparing yourself physically and, more importantly, mentally for what's going to happen over the course of those days.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it doesn't happen overnight. As we're just about to go into the Olympics, the Tokyo Olympics, which is going to be an amazing Olympics for lots of different reasons. But these people, plan for 4 years. It's not that they don't run into tournaments through those 4 years. They run into lots of tournaments. There's always, the World Athletics Championships, and then there's the Commonwealth Athletics Championship, and then your regional championships and your national championships. So these people are putting themselves up against the best, and the Olympics becomes the best of the best. Well, it just so happens that one of the myths that I've heard in many years, American golfers don't like links courses. Now, that may be true, actually. I'm not too sure who likes a links course when the wind's blowing and the rough is as bad as that down in Sandwich. But the point is, the myth has been put to bed that if you look at the leaderboard, look at the top 20 players, there were lots of Americans in there, and South Africans, a couple of Brits, but it was actually predominantly coming from the American arena. So let's put that myth to bed. Americans can play links courses. They may not like them, but it's not necessarily home advantage. Maybe if anyone from the R&A's listening in, they need to be thinking about that going forward, certainly for future Ryder Cups. But this links course, let's just talk a little bit about it, because I heard, and he's found the only tree on the course. So many times, one particularly, world number one, I suppose, Dustin Johnson just happened to find the only tree on the course. And equally, the R&A set up the first course, the first hole, with an intention. The actual green wasn't that bad, but the fairway, as you said, you could hit a perfect fairway and it would ripple off, down the sides. I was looking at some stats, and I think it's something like 25% of all the first shots actually stayed on the fairway. So that just shows, how difficult that first hole is. But time and time again, you're going to the Open, as Morikawa did for the very first time, so not a bad record, 1 in 1. And they pick up the driver because it's a long hole. And there was no wind, frankly, even, when we were teeing off on Thursday. And yet the majority of players, nearly all of the bad golf, if there is such a thing with these professionals, ended up in the rough on the right-hand side. But boy, was it rough. On some occasions, I don't know how they even saw the ball, frankly. It was so deep. Fortunately, it wasn't you and me playing and going in the rough and we're saying, okay, well, that's a lost ball. you wouldn't even think about it, You might keep your eye on the ball and saying, well, it's about there, I'll give it a go, but I'll play a mulligan, and see what happens. But fortunately, there were plenty of stewards on the course that, help people find their balls. But this mentality of taking the driver on the first hole at the beginning of the championship, I just don't know where that comes from, I'm afraid. Whereas a nice trusty old 3-wood, which all of them do, you always hear them saying a trusty 3-wood, it's not going to go wayward, and it might get into the first cut. What made the mentality? What was the mindset around the petrol heads, really, that were going after the driver on the literally the first hole. What were your thoughts on that one?
Well, it's I suppose over the course of the practice rounds, they're building up the strategy. They've looked at the holes where they've got a chance to pick up a shot, and they want to get off to a good start. You know, they want to get focused. For some players, maybe the driver is the best club, but they've got to remember that they're standing at an Open Championship, you know, the oldest championship on the planet, which has its own credentials in terms of the aura that is around the place. You know, I haven't been for an Open for quite a few years now, but you only have to walk through the gates as a spectator, and the butterflies are there in your stomach. So what it's like standing with a few thousand people around the first tee and your name's announced. You know, I get a lot of the guys at the golf club when I turn up to play. I got over golf last week, by the way, which is very rare for me in these days. But I actually played 3 rounds of golf. But
oh wow!
They say to me, so are you still nervous on the first tee? Well, I've been a pro for over 36 years now, and I still get nervous on the first tee. It happens, and it happens because I care. But over the course of a career, you learn to deal with that. You learn to focus on what you need to do. And I think the players not necessarily thinking about where do I want to be. Playing links golf is like playing a game of chess. You plan your moves well in advance, and you don't have to hit it 300 yards with a driver, because you could hit a 3-wood, hitting it at the right trajectory. It will run 300 yards on a links course.
Yeah.
So it's not the game they play in the States, which is fly it through the air, let it land on the green or land on the fairway, and if it lands on the fairway, it stops on the fairway. If you hit it 300 yards on a links course and it hits the wrong little bit of slope, you're dead, you're history. And if any member at St. George's would love to have that many stewards around, especially now with
I bet they would.
now, 3 minutes to look for a golf ball. You know, the rounds would be taking 5 hours because they'd be sending the caddies ahead to watch out what was going on. So for me, it's clearing up that strategy. Where do I want to be? What do I want to do? If you feel it's the driver, be fully committed to hit that driver. But bear in mind the situation you're actually in. Maybe the wind. I know the wind blew off the coast. So the first hole at St. George's, you would be playing with the wind coming off the sea. It'd be kind of quartering kind of into your face and from the left. So maybe that created some of the decisions. But some of the drives were a long way up, with guys only hitting wedges and 9-irons in out of that thick rough. But I'd still rather be hitting a 6 or a 7-iron in off the fairway with a nice, fairly flattish lie, being able to control the golf ball. Because once you're in the cabbage, as the guys would call it on tour, you don't have a lot of control over what's happening.
You're absolutely right, and I'm going to mention the name Colin Morikawa, because that's exactly what he did on that first hole, 4 days on the trot. This wasn't the flex your muscles, I'm going to show him how big my driver's going to be. This was, I'm going to play the course, I'm going to play here. I mean, the good news is it was a British crowd. They clapped people when, every single golfer got clapped as they took up to the tee, and there was silence. I didn't hear anyone in the crowd boo or
no.
Get in the hole, this stupid commentary that everyone's got somewhere else. But the point is, it was a respective audience, and there were thousands. I mean, one of my sons was there, and he had butterflies going in, feeling, actually going onto a golf course where there's lots of other people and you're actually watching a major tournament is a plus over the last 18 months, isn't it? But Absolutely. You can just imagine that a lot of these players haven't played in the crowd arena for some time.
No,
and yet definitely. All of the big players were saying it's so great to have the fans back.
Yeah, definitely.
And interestingly enough, some players can play with the fans, and some players actually can't play with the fans, as we saw on many occasions over the weekend. But it was a fascinating, a fantastic and fascinating arena, because we all expected, Movers Saturday to really show and move the pack around, and indeed it did. It didn't really give us as many movers as we would normally have expected, I suppose, but that's because I think because there was no wind, I think the golfers were second guessing. And they were, maybe thinking that, well, the wind will come up, it's due to come. And despite the fact they're in the third day, there's all these gremlins that are going on in their mind. But as we saw on the Sunday, the expectation of all of those great players, as you said, we've got some fantastic names up there, and we've got some new names as well, to actually come through the pack and make a push. The only one that really did that was Jordan Spieth. Mm-hmm. And the rest seemed to, get ahead, one shot ahead, and then fall back again. So that the move wasn't moving. And I felt a bit sorry for Jon Rahm as well, but he put a consistent Sunday in, and probably an unsung hero, if you like, because he was pretty consistent on the Sunday. And sort of ended up, I think it was fourth at the end, wasn't it? Tied fourth.
Yeah.
Which is, if this is the British Open, the oldest championship in the world, that's a pretty good, a pretty good showing, especially on a difficult course like this. But I'd like to, you and I observed quite a few things, and I'd just like to focus on a couple of players, perhaps not during their round, but perhaps during the practice. What are they practicing? And one particular instance that I think you picked up and I picked up was where two coaches were looking at what Rory McIlroy was doing on the putting green. So why don't we share our thoughts on that arena?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I see an awful lot to when I'm coaching my clients when it comes to putting. Putting is two skills. It's distance and direction. If you know you can hit it a particular distance, i.e. you know the speed of the green, you can read the putt. If you don't know the speed, you can't read the putt because you can't assess how much the ball is actually going to break. So it's about distance and direction. So the first skill is, do I know the speed of the greens today? Can I hit the ball the distance I need? So if I've got a 10-foot putt, I'm thinking of hitting it 10 feet, 6 inches. That will give me the optimum chance of holding that putt, okay? So there was one instance where McIlroy was practicing short putts, and I would say he was holding 10 out of 10, on the putting green, no pressure, 3 foot, 4 feet, maybe 5 feet. Every putt was consistently going in, and the caddies throwing the ball back to him. And they cut back to the studio, and they went back to the putting green a few minutes later. He's then hitting putts from 15 and 20 feet. And none of them were going in.
But interesting enough, the 15 to 20 feet is likely to happen on a links course, just because of the break. So the short putts, typically, as we saw consistently over the weekend, the short putts were there because they were two putting.
Yes.
Not absolutely. Because they'd necessarily hit the ball into the green. It was very few that hit the ball into the green and had a short putt. The majority were second putts. So the majority of the putts you're going to hit will be 15, 20 feet.
Correct. And you've got to be thinking about that they're going to be chances. In some instances, you're better off being 15 to 20 feet away, putting fairly straight and up the hill, than you are being 5 or 6 feet away with a great big break.
Break to the left or the right. Exactly. Yeah. However good it looks on TV, golfers don't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll go up and chat to people on the putting green, and they'll be hitting putts from 10 or 15 feet, and they might get 1 out of 10 in the hole. And I'll say, this is what Rory was doing. I'll just say, well, why are you practicing missing? Well, what do you mean? So, well, how many have you just holed? I got 1 out of my last 10 or 15 tries. Okay. I said, so you go and play the first hole, you play it nicely, you've hit a nice tee shot, you've got nicely onto the green, you've got the putt of a similar length that you've just had on the putting green here. And the last memory your brain has got of you hitting that putt was holing 1 out of maybe 10 or 15. What are your chances of making it? And that's the point Andrew Coltart was making about Rory. I don't like to see players doing that because they're just practicing missing. They're not taking anything positive forward into the round. And you'd be much better off practicing to a T-peg or hitting it at speed to the apron, to the edge of the green. So you're gauging and just getting used to the speed of the green. These guys can read greens. I'm sorry, they know how to read a green. Rory McIlroy's been reading greens since he was probably 9 or 10 years old, when he really started to develop properly as a golfer. And now they're looking at books that are telling them how to read greens. Well, gravity is gravity. Trust your instincts, use your eyes, get a feel for the pace. And I think far too many of them get far too mechanical over what they're doing, rather than playing with the sense of feel. The classic thing was on Saturday night. Jordan Spieth three-putted the last. He was there. He three-putted the last. Can't remember whether he made bogey or double bogey. He had a good birdie chance. He didn't go into the media tent. He ran off the 18th green, up the stairs. 10 minutes later, he's on the putting green working with his coach. Well, I'd love to have been inside the heads, because the heads to try and work out what they were trying to think about getting him to do with his putting. The night before the final round of a major, when you're in contention, the last thing you want to be doing is working on mechanics of what you're doing with your putting stroke. If you haven't got it right by then, you ain't got it right for the next morning. I really am sorry. You've just got to trust your instincts. These guys know they can hit the golf ball. I talk to all of my clients now, and we will do it regularly when we're working together at a venue. And we'll say the next shot you're about to hit could be the best shot you've ever hit. Now, whether that's a drive, an iron, a bunker shot, a putt, this next shot could be the best shot you've ever hit. How are you going to show up? Do you want to be the best version of you? Yeah? Or this bullet-shattered golfer who's been beating themselves up for the last 10 holes because they haven't done anything right. The next shot could always be the best shot you've ever hit. Show up as your best. Focus on what you need to do and just let it happen. And the players who were doing that better were the players who were round the top of the leaderboard the longest. You could even see in Louis Oosthuizen's body language as he dropped away over the last 2 rounds. Didn't fall away that far. He still finished well up there, but his body language wasn't quite the same over the last 2 rounds as it was over the first 2 rounds. It wasn't as sharp. It wasn't as positive.
And it wasn't because he didn't want to win. I mean, I think that's what we need to sort of make the point here. We're talking about really fine margins of the world's best golfers. Yeah, so this isn't your club, or on the practice range, or a little pitch and putt in your back garden. We're talking about very, very fine margins at the highest level of their profession. And this is what they do. This is their day job, by the way. We need to make that clear. They haven't got any part-time roles. They may have an investment arm that's going on somewhere over there, but typically they're not running that. They turn up and they sign books and they sign T-shirts and hats and goodness knows what else. That is not their day job. Their day job is tee to green, tee to green, tee to green in as few shots as possible. And hopefully, if you do it well enough, you'll beat the rest. And the other thing is, we've sidelined the likes of Jordan Spieth and Rory McIlroy because we wish them all the best. We love to watch these players. I mean, Spieth, to me, he's a very creative individual, and Rory in his day was equally creative. And these guys can do trick shots, literally in their sleep. And what we're seeing on occasion is those trick shots happening in reality. And it's only because they've practiced and practiced and practiced that we're expecting them to do the best, and we're just as disappointed when they play a bad shot, But that's, unfortunately, that's what links courses out and golf management and course management is all about. But it's this thing that you and I come back to all the time. It's resilience. expectation and resilience. And we're going to go back to wrap up, really, to Collin Morikawa. You know, he's 2 for 2. In many respects, he should retire because potentially, given the experience of everybody else, it's all downhill from here. And you've only got to look at Jordan Spieth for 5 years. He's been in the wilderness.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the key thing here is, what is his mentality? Now, bear in mind, he's 24, not a tremendous amount of experience, certainly not of the golf course. But I just liked his demeanor. I mean, it was just so pleasant to watch someone not just playing the course, but playing their ability. And I'll just bear out one particular instance. He and every other golfer at that level knows that they would rather do a full swing on literally getting onto the green than being between clubs or hitting slightly down a club.
Yeah.
Or overswinging, as we saw on occasions. And that typically has disastrous effects, even with the best golfers in the world. And he sort of played to that. So he would hit a 3-wood, knowing that he'd like a 7 or an 8 iron to chip in, and that he can control that 7 or 8 iron, even if he's in the second cut or the first cut. But he can't control it if he's in the rough. I mean, the real rough. I mean, we saw reeds that were sort of, you can't see it on the screen. They were so deep, and typical links course, they're reeds, you know. There's lots of lovely green grass at the bottom and incredibly brown and light tan stuff above it. But his demeanor, his knowing what he was capable of and playing in some respects out of his skin, knowing he's got to play out of his skin because he's at such a tournament. And let's face it, he was a few shots off the lead on close of play Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when he teed off, I think it was 4 shots.
Yeah.
It didn't panic him, you know.
No.
He just went and played his game. And I think, you know, just if we can wrap up a few thoughts there, we all heard of how difficult this course was, and the R&A had been really nasty on the Sunday, put in horrible pin positions, which is all great for the crowd, frankly, because we really want to see players go for it. So who, apart from Collin Morikawa, who I don't think we can praise high enough, who stood out for you? Who was an up-and-coming bright superstar? Could be an old one.
Yeah, I mean, Marcel Siem was fantastic.
Unbelievable.
You know, I mean, the guy was on tour several years ago, has been playing around the Challenge Tour, had a win this year on the Challenge Tour. Obviously, very passionate guy, loves to play the crowd. You know, he's playing the final round, is in contention, and he makes 8 down the 14th. It's his tee shot out of bounds down the 14th. Falls well down the field, and then bounces back with 2 or 3 birdies, and you know, from 15 in to move himself back up the leaderboard and earn himself a decent check. As we were saying earlier, there's so many good young players. You know, we forget Jon Rahm isn't very old.
No, he's just been a name for so long. That we think, you know, he's almost been in my mind, when I heard Garcia was playing, I thought, well, haven't Jon Rahm and Garcia been around forever? And there's 14 years difference, I think, in the age between the two of them. Yeah. It's just that we've heard them spoken about, you know, so often. And you know, even Garcia, you know, came up and did things differently. I remember Ernie Els a few years ago, I don't recall which, I think it might have been the Masters, where he had 5 putts. And he was interviewed, if you remember, and the interviewer said, "So how did that feel?" He said, "Well, have you never had the yips before? You know, have you ever played golf?" Because he said, "You bounced back on the second hole." He said, "Yeah, I'll put it behind me."
Yeah. absolutely, yeah.
And I think, you know, that overall is, you know, you're only as good as this shot.
Yeah.
You know, forget the last shot. You know, get on with this shot. And I think this is where you mentioned Seam. That was a horrible hole. But for some reason, he used his bounce back ability, really,
Yeah.
and of his you know, playing career over the last 4 or 5 years, where he's been, you know, he's lost his ticket and got it back, and now actually finishing so high, he should have the confidence to take it to the next level. So he's another up and coming young player.
The other three young ones I'd really focus on. Unfortunately for Will Zalatoris, who did well in the Masters, he was doing well in the Masters. Hit it into the rough, I think, in the first round, and he'd hit a shot. He obviously jarred something. He completed the round. He was playing with Rahm. I can't remember whether Rahm was playing with Casey. Anyway, they played a 2-ball the second day because he'd got up in the morning and he'd strained his back, hitting the shot out of the rough. These guys are fit. I mean, there's more meat on a butcher's pencil when you look at Will Zalatoris, but these guys are strong. And if these guys are pulling the back, hitting these shots out of this rough, then it is tough stuff. There's a guy I watched at the Irish Open and the Scottish Open, a guy called another American, Johannes Veerman, tall guy, looks very, very composed, very, very talented. And as a British guy, I was looking what Jack Senior would do.
Yeah.
Because Jack Senior qualified the previous week from finishing well in the Scottish Open, one of the 3 players to get in. He was certainly up and around the leaderboard after 2 rounds, 5 or 6 under par. Fell away at the weekend, but looks like he's got the kind of game, very, very solid, hits the ball hard, and a good putter. I mean, when his putts go into the hole, I said I want to hit putts about 10 foot 6 inches. His 10-foot putts are going about 13 feet. So, you know, the ball he's not shy at giving the hole a run. So there could be, you know, some guys to watch going forwards. But yet it's not that they're not playing with any kind of fear. They're just learning to deal with it. They're focused on only what they need to do. And the best players, the guy who's winning is the guy who's focused on just what he needs to do now. What's happened has happened. You can't control what's happened. It's what you need to do right here, right now, and then move on. And then you reboot and do it all again, and do it all again, and do it all again. It's like golf is like Groundhog Day. It just comes round a lot. It just comes round a lot quicker.
Exactly. And as you were saying that, I'm thinking about some of the mannerisms that we've got from golfers. I mean, Jordan Spieth has this beautiful affection of shouting at the ball, you know, and everyone's listening. And the commentator said, you know, sometimes when he shouts at the ball, it actually happens.
Yeah.
I'm sort of laughing away, knowing full well that's never going to happen. You know, you pass the knowledge to the ball when you hit it. You know, then you may think you're encouraging the ball to do what you want it to do, but the fact of life is it's completely out of your control. But it makes him feel good about it, you know, and it's another quirk of the sport, I suppose, where we can have a little bit of entertainment. But we got to remember is we didn't have the Open last year, so a note to finish on, I suppose. We didn't have the Open last year, and to be honest with you, I'd forgotten who was the Open champion.
Yeah, Shane
Lowry, you know, turned up on the leaderboard. You know, he got to about 5 or 6 under, and then they're starting to follow him on Sky and on BBC, and his demeanour. I mean, what a fantastic prior champion, and what a one to hand it over to a young up and coming champion. So I thought that was probably a little twist of the tail, I suppose, in it, that we had quite an old champion. We didn't have a championship last year. So first time in the history of the Open, it skipped. So now we got a new champion. So good luck to Colin Morikawa. We're looking forward to, you know, seeing him. You never know. Ryder Cup's not that far away. I'm sure he's in that mix. Let's see what let's see what team player he really is. And I'm looking forward to the European contingent, because I think we've got some really interesting names coming through.
Definitely.
Bright Check Chowses is still there.
Yeah.
Good old Ian Poulter is still there, still getting with the crowd. Casey's still there, bringing the crowd along. Lee Westwood, all these very old names now. We need a bit of young blood coming through, and I'm sure with all of the investment that's going into golf, that's going to soon be coming. But it's been great speaking with you over what was, to me, probably the one of the most entertaining, inspiring Opens in the last few years. And that really sets the tone for the rest of the season. So let's look forward to it.
Yeah, and I think looking forward next year, we're the 150th Open next year. We're back at the golf in St Andrews. That'll be great. Now that is a golf course that will test anybody. So yeah, that'll be superb.
Well, they've got a year to practice, so we'll look forward to we'll see you a little bit before that. So for the moment, it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. Goodbye, and we'll see you at the next It's Tee Time. Cheerio.